My sister said my husband wasn't a real man until she showed up at our door with her kids and nowhere to go. My sister had this weird talent for turning an insult into something that sounded almost casual, like she was commenting on the weather or asking if anybody wanted more coffee. She could say the nastiest thing with a little shrug and then act confused when people reacted, which was honestly impressive in the same way a leak in your ceiling is impressive because, wow, look at that. It really did ruin the whole room. My name is Talia, and before all of this blew up, I had what I thought was a pretty normal life. Not perfect. Not some glossy version people post online so strangers can clap for them. Just normal. I worked as a medical billing coordinator at a medium-sized clinic, which is a very fancy way of saying I spent most of my day fixing insurance mistakes, arguing with codes, and trying not to scream into my coffee while people asked me why a form had vanished from a system nobody trusted in the first place. My husband worked a regular office job and, on the side, made videos about games. He had been doing that since before we were even serious, back when his setup was a cheap desk, a headset that looked like it had been chewed by a raccoon, and this ridiculous amount of hope that made me roll my eyes and love him more at the same time. He never pretended it was a real income at first. It was a hobby. A loud hobby sometimes, because he would get excited and forget the walls in our apartment were made of paper and bad decisions, but still a hobby. Then the pandemic happened, and I know everybody has their own version of that sentence, so I won't make it sound special. His company shut down for good. Not paused, not downsized. Gone. One day he had a job, and then there were meetings and emails and that flat, dead tone people use when they tell you your life just changed, but they don't want to say it that way. I was pregnant at the time, swollen, exhausted, crying because a certain smell from the fridge made me gag, and suddenly I was the one carrying the household. I don't say that to make myself a saint, because I absolutely wasn't. I panicked. I snapped at him. I made ugly comments under my breath when the bills came in, then apologized, then made another one 3 days later because stress does not bring out my best personality. He sent out resumes every morning, took calls, got rejected, got ghosted, and kept trying to act fine. He was not fine. I could see it in the way he stopped singing in the shower, in the way he stayed awake after I went to bed, in the way he apologized for eating leftovers like he was personally bankrupting us with pasta. The channel started growing because he suddenly had time, and I hated that I resented it at first. There, I said it. I resented the thing that later saved us because in that moment it looked like him sitting at home talking about games while I was waddling into work with swollen ankles and a personality made entirely of unpaid bills. But he wasn't messing around. He treated it like a job before it paid like one. He edited late, he answered emails, he made schedules, he learned things I didn't even know were things, like how a thumbnail could make or break a video and how sponsors wanted numbers, not vibes. Slowly, and I mean slowly, money came in, a tiny ad payment here, a small sponsorship from a gaming accessory company there, live streams where people sent little payments that made him sit back like someone had handed him a winning lottery ticket. It wasn't magic. It wasn't one viral video, and suddenly we were buying a mansion. It was years of him building something while still carrying the shame of losing the thing he thought made him useful. When our daughter was born, we made a choice that seemed practical to us, and apparently offensive to my sister's whole view of the universe. He stayed home with the baby and worked on the channel full-time. I kept my job. We didn't have to pay for childcare, which, if you've ever looked at childcare costs, is basically like avoiding a second rent payment with finger paint involved. He was good with her, too. Annoyingly good. He could get her to stop crying by making a dumb dinosaur noise. I could bounce her for 40 minutes and end up crying with her. He learned her nap schedule, her favorite blanket, the exact way she liked her little bottles warmed. Did he sometimes forget laundry existed until the basket looked like it was preparing for war? Yes. Did I sometimes come home and find the kitchen looking like a snack tornado had passed through? Also, yes. But we were a team, messy and tired and real. I would take over when I got home so he could edit. He would handle mornings because I had to leave early. We fought. We made up. We paid bills. After a couple of years, the channel income became stable enough that we paid off the rest of my student loan. I cried when that final payment cleared, and not in a cute way. More like a raccoon in mascara. Then later, when the income stayed consistent and I stopped expecting the universe to punish us for breathing, we moved into a bigger house. Not a mansion, not a house with a gate or a fountain or any of that ridiculous stuff. Just a real house with space for our daughter to have toys without every room looking like a daycare had exploded. My parents were proud. His side was proud. Even I was proud, though I acted cool about it because that's what I do when I don't want to admit something matters. We took a few trips because some contracts involved travel, and he would turn part of it into content. It looked glamorous from the outside, I guess, but most of it was him filming, emailing, worrying about deadlines, and me holding a tired child while wondering why every airport meal costs the same as a small medical procedure. My sister watched all of that happen from the edge of our life with this expression that I didn't understand at first. I thought it was stress. She had plenty of reason to be stressed. She had left school young, married the guy she called the love of her life, and then got pregnant with twins before she had really figured out how to be married to someone who could barely figure out how to be an adult. When she told him she was pregnant, he didn't become some teary movie husband. He pressured her to end the pregnancy and said they couldn't afford it, which was technically true, but also not a moral philosophy when you're the one who helped create the situation. She refused. He bailed emotionally before he bailed physically, and by the time the boys were born, she was basically alone. She worked as a cashier at a grocery store, took extra shifts when she could, and spent years chasing a man who claimed gambling debts made child support impossible, while somehow finding money for dates with whatever woman he was seeing that month. Funny how broke men always have a budget for impressing women who don't know them yet. So we helped. My parents helped too, but they were still working and not exactly swimming in money. My husband and I had more room to help once the channel started doing well, so we did. We covered late rent more than once. We bought groceries. We paid for a car repair, then later helped her buy a used car when the old one died dramatically in a parking lot like it had been waiting for an audience. We bought school clothes for the boys. We never made a big announcement about it. Never sat her down and said, "Please thank the successful gaming man who saved your week." It was family. She needed help. The boys were innocent. That was supposed to be the whole story, except my sister couldn't stand my husband. Not openly at first. At first it was little comments, the kind that slide under the door and make you wonder if you imagined them. She would ask, "So he just stays home all day?" And I would say, "He works from home." And she would make this tiny face like I had told her he collected toenail clippings for a living. When our daughter called for him instead of me during a family dinner, my sister laughed and said, "Well, of course he's basically the mom." Everybody kind of chuckled awkwardly, and I did that thing where you smile because you're trying to keep the peace, but inside you're already building a courtroom argument. I told myself she was tired. I told myself she was bitter because her ex had left and my husband stayed. I told myself a lot of things because admitting your own sister is being cruel on purpose feels worse than making excuses for her. The comments got nastier as our life got better. That sounds blunt, but it's true. When we paid off my loan, she said it must be nice to have a husband who plays games for money, while everyone else has real jobs. When we moved, she made a joke about me being the man of the house because I still had a clinic job. When my husband posted a video about balancing work and parenting, she said, "Wow, he's really leaning into the housewife thing." She said it in front of our mother, who told her to stop. And my sister rolled her eyes like we were all too sensitive. My husband heard more than he admitted. He would go quiet, then later say, "It's fine," which is the sentence men use when it is absolutely not fine, but they would rather swallow glass than talk about it. I could tell it hit him in the old wound, the one from losing his job while I was pregnant. He had rebuilt himself piece by piece, and my sister kept walking over with a hammer and acting surprised when I didn't find it adorable. I did push back. I need that on record because people love asking why you didn't say something sooner. Like emotional messes come with a neat button labeled "Solve Now." I told her he made more than a regular salary. I told her he was an involved father, not a failure. I told her the world had moved on from her little cave drawing of masculinity. She would say, "Relax, I was joking," or "You know how I am," which is the family version of a free crime pass. And because she was struggling, because the boys needed things, because my parents were always worried, I kept letting it go. Not completely. I complained to my husband, I ranted in my car, I wrote 3 different texts and deleted them because one of them included the phrase "jealous gremlin," and even I knew that was not productive. But I didn't cut her off. I didn't want to be the sister who had money and used it like a weapon. The night everything cracked started at my parents' house during one of those family dinners that sounds simple and becomes evidence later. My mother had made too much food because she believes leftovers are a love language. And my father kept trying to get the boys to eat vegetables by pretending broccoli made them taller. My daughter was running around with them, all 3 kids loud and sticky and happy. My husband and I had recently come back from an international trip tied to one of his contracts. It had been part work, part family time, with him filming in between meals and me carrying a backpack full of snacks like a pack mule with anxiety. My parents wanted to see pictures, and my aunt was there too, scrolling through them on my phone and making these sweet noises over every single one. My mother joked that next time we should take her, and my husband brightened up like a kid. He started talking about this place he had always wanted to visit because of a game culture event there, and he said if a contract ever lined up, he would love to bring my parents. He wasn't showing off. That is one thing about my husband that people mistake all the time. He gets excited and overshares, but he isn't rubbing it in. He was literally sitting there in an old hoodie because our daughter had spilled juice on his shirt earlier. My father was laughing, my aunt was asking questions, my mother was already mentally packing, and my sister sat across from us with her jaw tight enough to crack a walnut. I noticed. Of course I noticed. I also ignored it because I was tired of being the family tension detector. Then she said, loud enough for the whole table, "Must be nice being a glorified housewife with a passport." The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. My husband froze with his hand still around his glass. My daughter didn't understand, thank God, but the boys looked up because children always know when adults have changed the air. I looked at my sister and asked very calmly, "What did you just say?" That was my last calm sentence for a while, so let's appreciate it. She shrugged and said, "I said what I said. He stays home, takes care of a kid, plays games, and everybody acts like he's some provider. It's weird." My mother said her name sharply, and my sister kept going, because once people like her smell attention, they don't always know how to stop. She said no real man would choose to stay home. She said he was feminine. She said I had basically married a wife. I wish I could say I handled it with grace. I did not. Something in me just snapped clean in half. Maybe it was the years of comments. Maybe it was seeing my husband's face drain. Maybe it was the fact that this woman had accepted our money while sharpening knives for the man who helped her. I said, "Your real man is where, exactly?" Because last I checked, he's out pretending gambling debts are a personality while his kids eat food my house paid for. My aunt gasped. My father muttered something under his breath that was probably a prayer or a curse. My sister's face went red and she said, "This isn't about me." I said, "No, apparently it's about my husband's masculinity, which is hilarious since his so-called feminine money has been paying your rent." That was when my husband finally spoke. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't even look angry in the loud way. He looked tired. He said, "I guess I was man enough when my money kept a roof over your boys." And somehow that sentence hit harder than all my yelling, because it was quiet and true. My sister blinked like he had slapped her, and then she did what she always did when cornered. She acted offended by the consequences of her own mouth. She said we were humiliating her. She said I was choosing a man over blood. She said everybody knew I liked feeling superior. That one hit, by the way. Not because it was fair, but because siblings know exactly where to throw the rock. I told her the money was done, right there, in front of everyone, with my pulse in my ears and my daughter asking why her aunt was crying. I said we would not pay another bill, not cover another emergency, not rescue her from another deadline she lied about until it became a fire. She started backpedaling so fast she almost created wind. Suddenly she was just joking. Suddenly we were taking it wrong. Suddenly she loved my husband and respected our family and blah blah blah. My husband said, still quiet, that his wallet and our home were closed to her. My parents didn't defend her. That shocked her more than anything. My mother just sat there looking sick, and my father said, "You owe him an apology before you ask for anything else." Dinner ended like a car crash. Nobody knew what to do with the plates. The kids were confused. My sister left with the boys after grabbing their jackets so hard one of them started crying. I almost went after him, then stopped because my husband had walked outside and I could see his shoulders through the window. He was standing by our car, not moving. When I got in, he drove in silence for several blocks. I was still buzzing, still half proud of myself and half nauseous. Then he said, "I spent years trying not to feel useless. I didn't think she saw me that way too." That sentence gutted me. Not because of my sister, but because I realized he had been carrying more shame than I knew. I reached for his hand, and he let me, but he kept staring at the road. When we got home, after our daughter fell asleep, we talked for a long time. We agreed that if the boys truly needed help, we could help through my parents. Not through my sister, not cash in her hand, not anymore. My sister lasted less than a day before the messages started. At first, they were fake calm. I think things got blown out of proportion. Then, "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." Then, "It's sad that money changed you." By the afternoon, she had moved on to the boys. "I hope you're okay knowing your nephews might go without because your ego got hurt." I stared at that one for so long my phone dimmed. I wanted to respond with a paragraph that would have gotten me banned from polite society. Instead, I wrote, "If the boys need food, Mom and Dad can tell me directly. I won't send you money." She replied with a thumbs up. Just one. Somehow that tiny little symbol made me angrier than the insults. I know. Very mature. My therapist would have loved the data. The family took our side, which almost never happens cleanly in family drama, so I kept waiting for the twist. My parents had been at the table. My aunt had been at the table. There was no mystery version to debate. My mother called me the next morning and said my sister had been cruel and needed to apologize. Not just to keep access to help, but because it was the decent thing to do. My father was angrier than I expected. He had always tried to stay neutral with us, sometimes to a fault, but this time he said, "Your husband has done more for those boys than their own father." I cried after that call, partly from relief and partly because I hated that relief. I didn't want a scoreboard. I wanted my sister to not be awful to the man who had shown up. We blocked her after she called my husband a kept man in a group message. I didn't block her immediately, because of course I didn't. I reread the thread like a lunatic, zoomed in on the words as if they would become less disgusting if I punished myself enough. Then my husband took the phone from my hand, blocked her, and said, "You don't have to keep letting her spit on us just because the boys exist." I hated that he was right. I also hated that blocking her felt like abandoning my nephews, even though it wasn't. My parents promised to keep an eye on them. They said if the boys needed anything, they would tell us. My mother sounded tired already, and that should have warned me how bad things were getting, but I was still too busy being angry. A few weeks passed, and the silence did that thing where it started feeling peaceful and suspicious at the same time. My husband seemed lighter in small ways. He filmed more easily. He laughed louder with our daughter. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. Then my mother called and asked if I had heard from my sister. I said no, and immediately my stomach dropped because mothers don't ask that casually. She said the landlord had called their house looking for my sister because my sister had used them as an emergency contact years before and apparently wasn't answering. Rent was late. Not a few days late. Bad late. My father drove over there after work and got no answer, but the neighbor said my sister had been coming and going at odd hours and the boys had missed school. That last part made my throat close. Over the next couple of weeks, little pieces started showing up, and none of them made her look like the struggling but honest mother I had been defending in my head for years. My parents found out she had been using money we gave her for rent to cover old fees, short-term loans, late charges, and stupid impulse purchases she had no business making. I don't mean she bought one treat for herself because life is hard. I mean she had developed this whole juggling act where she would tell us the rent was due earlier than it was, take the money, plug a different hole, then panic when the actual rent came due and ask someone else for help. She had done it so often that she thought chaos was a budget. My father found a stack of unopened notices in her car when she stopped by their house and left the door unlocked. My mother said, "Maybe she was ashamed." I said, "She should have been honest." Then I felt like a monster because both things were true. The boys started showing up at my parents' house less. When they did, they looked off. One had shoes that were too small. The other kept asking for extra snacks for later, in a way that made my mother cry after they left. Their school called my parents because they were listed on emergency paperwork, saying the boys had come without lunch more than once and weren't dressed right for the weather. When my mother confronted my sister said everybody was exaggerating and kids forget things. When my father asked directly if she was about to lose the apartment, she screamed that we all wanted her to fail so we could steal her children. That became her new story. We weren't worried, we were plotting. My husband was the mastermind, apparently, which would have been funny if children hadn't been involved. This man cries during animated movies and forgets where he puts his keys twice a week. But yes, sure, secret villain. I struggled with guilt in a way I don't want to make pretty. I wondered if cutting her off had pushed the boys into that mess. I wondered if I had been too proud, too dramatic, too eager to finally punish her. Then I would remember her at my parents' table calling my husband less of a man, while eating food he helped buy. And the guilt would turn back into rage so fast it gave me emotional whiplash. My husband kept saying, "This was already happening. We were just funding the cover-up." I knew he was right. I still hated the sentence. Because when you're the one with the bigger house and the stable bills, people expect your boundaries to be softer. Like money is supposed to make you endlessly absorb other people's damage. By then, late rent had turned into notices she couldn't ignore. None of us knew she was that close to losing the apartment, because she kept lying until there was nothing left to hide. The night she showed up at our house, it was close to midnight. I remember because I had finally gotten into bed, My hair was still damp from a shower, and I was wearing a shirt with a hole near the collar that I keep pretending is not my comfort shirt. Our doorbell camera went off, and my husband checked his phone. His face changed, not scared exactly, more like his body got ready for impact. He said, "It's your sister." I sat up so fast I got dizzy. On the screen, she was standing under the porch light with the boys beside her, both half asleep, both holding backpacks. Behind her, the car was packed with bags and trash bags and loose blankets. My first thought was, no, not because I didn't care. Because I knew, before I knew, that whatever this was would become one of those memories that splits life into before and after. We opened the door but kept the chain on at first, which sounds cold until you have seen my sister in a rage. She looked awful. Hair greasy, eyes red, one of my old sweatshirts on under a coat, the boys in pajama pants and jackets too thin for the night air. She said, "Can we come in, or are you going to make the kids freeze?" I unlatched the chain so fast my hands shook. The boys came in and my daughter, woken up by the noise, peeked from the hallway in her little sleep shirt. She smiled when she saw her cousins, then stopped, because even a little kid can tell when something is wrong. I got the boys blankets, juice, crackers, anything my hands could find. One of them ate like he was trying not to look hungry. That broke something in me I still don't think has healed right. My sister said she had nowhere to go. She made it sound like she had been kicked out that night, like she had driven straight from a cruel landlord to my door. That wasn't true. And I found out within minutes because her stories don't hold up well under basic questions. She had lost the apartment days earlier. She had stayed in a cheap motel until the money ran out. Then she had spent 2 nights with the boys sleeping in the car, moving between parking lots because she was afraid someone would call authorities. I said, "You let them sleep in a car for 2 nights before coming here?" She snapped, "Don't start. Don't start." As if I had brought up a messy closet and not 2 children curled up in the backseat in winter air. I told her she needed to call our parents. She refused at first because pride is apparently very warm and filling. My husband said, "Then we will." She glared at him like he was the reason gravity existed. I called my father. My voice sounded weird, too calm, like my body had decided panic could wait. He arrived in less than 20 minutes, still in sweatpants, hair smashed on one side. My mother was behind him, crying before she even crossed the doorway. My father looked at the boys, really looked, and his face did this terrible collapse. He hugged them and said, "Aw, you're coming with us tonight." My sister immediately started yelling that nobody was taking her kids. My father said, "Then you come too, but tomorrow morning you sit down with us, show every bill, every notice, every account, and we make a real plan." He said she could stay at their house that night, but only if she agreed to structured help. No more lies, no more cash disappearing, no more hiding. She refused. I still can't explain that part without wanting to shake her. She refused while her boys sat on my couch with crumbs on their shirts and fear in their eyes. She said we were setting her up. She said my husband had turned everyone against her. She said my father wanted to replace her as the parent because he hated that she was a single mother. My mother begged. I mean begged. My sister grabbed her keys and said she would rather sleep in the car than hand her life over to us. My husband stepped in front of the door and said, "The boys are not getting back in that car tonight." For a second, I thought she might swing at him. She didn't. She just screamed that he wasn't their father. My father said, "No, but I am your father and those are my grandsons." It was the most forceful I had ever heard him. Then one of the boys started crying and whispered that he wanted to go with Grandma. My sister looked like she might fight everyone, then shoved a backpack at my father. "Fine," she snapped. "Take them for tonight. But don't act like you won." That was why the night didn't get uglier. In the end, the boys went with my parents. My sister left alone in the car, tires squealing like she had a point to prove to the pavement. I stood in my entryway shaking so badly my husband had to take the glass of water out of my hand. My daughter cried because everyone else was crying and because her cousins had left without playing. I crawled into bed with her until she fell asleep again, then went downstairs and threw up in the bathroom. Not elegant, not dramatic in the pretty way, just my body rejecting the whole night. The next morning, my father called child protection. He didn't ask us for permission. He just told me after. His voice sounded 10 years older. He said he had reported the conditions the boys were found in, the sleeping in the car, the school concerns, the lack of stable housing. My mother could barely speak in the background. I know some people hear that and think calling child protection on your own daughter is betrayal. I get that. I also know what those boys looked like on my couch. Both things can be true, and that's the part nobody prepares you for. The system opened a case. They spoke to the school. They interviewed the boys gently, at least from what my parents told me. They asked about housing, food, supervision. My sister missed the first meeting. Then she missed another call. Then she claimed she never got the messages, which might have worked if she hadn't been texting my mother insults during the same time window. My parents became the temporary family placement. The phrase sounded clinical and weird, like the boys were furniture being stored somewhere. But the reality was my parents buying bunk beds and extra toothbrushes and trying to learn the school drop-off routine without looking as overwhelmed as they were. My nephews were 7, old enough to understand they were not home and young enough to still ask when their mom was coming. One of them wet the bed the first week and cried like he had committed a crime. My mother called me afterwards sobbing in the laundry room. I drove over with detergent and ended up sitting on the floor beside her because what else do you do when your family is falling apart and the washing machine is louder than your ability to fix it? My sister bounced between blaming everyone and pretending nothing was wrong. She sent my mother long messages about how the boys were being brainwashed. She told our aunt that my husband wanted to punish her because she saw through him. She left me voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize, sometimes crying, sometimes calling me a smug little princess, sometimes saying the boys needed their mother and I would understand someday when my daughter hated me. That last one made me sit in my car outside work with my hands on the steering wheel until my boss knocked on the window and asked if I was okay. I said yes because what was I supposed to say? Actually, my sister is emotionally waterboarding me before lunch. I went inside and fixed billing errors like my personal life wasn't on fire. For a while, the situation settled into this miserable routine. The boys stayed with my parents. My sister drifted around, sometimes staying with a friend, sometimes in her car, sometimes claiming she had a room somewhere but refusing to give an address. The caseworker, who seemed tired in the way people get tired when they have seen every version of family denial, told my parents that reunification required basic steps: stable housing, income, meetings, supervised visits, cooperation. It sounded simple because the bar was literally show up and don't lie. My sister treated it like an act of war. She missed visits and then accused my parents of keeping the boys from her. She showed up late and blamed traffic. She brought them cheap toys but forgot socks. The boys loved her anyway because children are loyal in ways adults don't deserve. Watching that hurt the most. Months passed like that. My daughter adjusted to seeing her cousins at my parents' house more often. She asked why they didn't sleep at their apartment anymore, and I gave the kind of answer parents give when the truth is too ugly and a lie feels too disrespectful. I said their mom was having a hard time and grandma and grandpa were helping. She accepted that because she was 5 and still believed adults mostly knew what they were doing. I wish I had her confidence. My husband became more protective of our home. He checked the cameras more. He reminded me to lock the side door. I teased him for being paranoid, but gently, because I knew he wasn't afraid of danger in the movie sense. He was afraid of chaos walking through the door again, wearing my sister's face. Then it did. I was at work, in a meeting about insurance denials that could have been an email and then a nap, when my phone started buzzing in my bag. I ignored it at first because my boss was talking and I was trying to look like a professional human, not a woman whose family had become a group project for social services. By the time I checked, I had missed calls from my husband, my mother, and the alarm notification from the house cameras. My hands went cold before I even opened anything. There was a text from my husband. "Your sister is here, she's drunk. I called the police, daughter is with me." I don't remember standing up, but suddenly everyone was looking at me. I said, "Family emergency," and left so fast I forgot my notebook. Later I watched the camera footage, and I still hate that I had to see it that way. My sister showed up in the middle of the day, swaying on our porch, banging on the door like the house owed her money. He told our daughter to go to her room, but she froze in the hallway instead, clutching her stuffed animal. My husband opened the door only a crack and told her she needed to leave. She started crying, saying she just wanted to talk, just 1 minute, just please. And I could see him hesitate because he is not built to slam a door in a crying person's face. That tiny hesitation was enough. When he opened the door a little wider, she shoved her way in. Not some action scene, not dramatic, just ugly, and fast, and real. He stepped back because our daughter was behind him, and my sister stumbled into our entryway, yelling that he had destroyed her family. My husband moved in front of our daughter and kept saying, "You need to leave. You're scaring her." My sister pointed at him and screamed that he had no right to talk about children, that he had stolen hers, that he used money to make everyone worship him. She knocked over a little table by the door. A framed picture fell and cracked. She grabbed a stack of our daughter's drawings from the counter and threw them, which sounds small but made my daughter burst into tears because kids don't understand symbolic rage. They just see their rainbow picture on the floor. My husband tried calling my mother, got no answer, then called the police. He kept his voice steady, and I know him well enough to know that meant he was terrified. By the time the officers arrived, my sister was in the living room, crying and yelling and slurring in this awful loop. She tried to tell them my husband had attacked her. The doorbell camera and the living room camera disagreed with impressive speed. She was clearly intoxicated. There was broken glass from the picture frame, the knocked-over table, my daughter sobbing behind my husband. The officers separated them, asked questions, watched enough footage to understand she had forced her way in, and took her outside. She screamed my name even though I wasn't there. That part messed me up more than I expected. Hearing her yell for me like I was supposed to appear and save her from consequences while my own child cried because of her. The nerve, the sadness, the whole rotten knot of it. She was detained for disturbing the peace, property damage, and the safety concerns around a child being present. I know the exact labels mattered less than the fact that there was now a police report attached to her already collapsing custody situation. My husband called me once she was gone. He sounded calm in that horrible way people sound after adrenaline empties them out. I asked if our daughter was hurt. He said no, but she was scared. I asked if he was hurt. He said no. Then, after a pause, he said, I shouldn't have opened the door. I nearly lost it. Not at him. At the fact that he was standing in broken glass and still looking for the part where it was his fault. I told him, probably too loudly from my car, no, she shouldn't have pushed into our house. A woman in the parking lot stared at me. I stared back like, please, join the family meeting. When I got home, our daughter was on the couch wrapped in a blanket, eyes puffy, my husband beside her with a cartoon playing low. She ran to me and asked if her aunt was mad at her. I had to sit on the floor because my knees didn't feel trustworthy. I told her no, absolutely not. Grown-up feelings are not her fault. She asked why her aunt broke the picture. I said her aunt was not making safe choices. I wanted to say much worse. I wanted to say your aunt is selfish and sick and angry, and she decided to pour it into our house because that is easier than facing herself. But you can't hand that to a 5-year-old. So I said safe choices and unsafe choices like a parent in a pamphlet, then held her until she fell asleep against me. That night, my husband and I agreed on a hard boundary. Any future attempt to come to our home, contact our daughter, or force contact with us would lead to a protective order. We saved the footage, kept the police report, and told the caseworker. We were not trying to turn our lives into a legal file, but we were done pretending family drama couldn't become dangerous. We weren't playing family negotiation anymore. My mother cried when I told her, not because she disagreed, but because every boundary made the situation more real. My father was furious. He had been angry before, but this was different. He said, "She brought it to your child." Those words became the line for him. The next court update was worse for my sister. The caseworker included the arrest, the missed meetings, the unstable housing, the intoxication, the forced entry. My parents asked the court for legal temporary custody, not just informal placement. They had documentation from the school, child protection, and the police report. It sounds neat when I list it. It was not neat. It was my parents sitting at their kitchen table with folders while the boys watched cartoons in the next room, and my mother whispering, "I don't want to fight my daughter," while still signing what needed to be signed. No one celebrated when the temporary custody was granted. I need to say that because people love imagining family justice like a victory dance. It wasn't. It was my mother coming home from court and going straight to the bathroom to cry. It was my father standing in the garage for almost an hour pretending to organize tools. It was the boys asking if they were in trouble. It was my sister sending one message through a relative that said, "Enjoy my kids. Super healthy." The order allowed supervised visits if she followed the plan, but she treated the supervision like humiliation instead of a bridge back to her own children. She missed sessions. She showed up late. She accused the supervisor of judging her. She claimed the bus was late. Then my mother found out she had gotten a ride offer and refused it because she didn't want pity. Pride. Again. Always pride. Sitting in the passenger seat while everything else crashed. The boys slowly got better in the way children do when their bodies finally trust breakfast will happen tomorrow. Their shoulders loosened. They stopped hoarding snacks in their backpacks, though one still kept crackers under his pillow for a while. They started sleeping through the night. Their teachers said they were more focused. My parents looked older but also more alive in a strange way. Like caring for the boys gave them purpose and drained them dry at the same time. My mother learned their spelling lists. My father took them to get haircuts and came home with all three of them looking ridiculous because he let the boys choose his style too. They laughed about that for days. Then one of the boys asked if their mom would think it was funny, and the room went quiet. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was more like stepping around broken glass in socks. My sister's ex got dragged back into the picture because my parents filed for child support on the boy's behalf. He acted shocked. Shocked. As if children he helped create were an unexpected subscription charge. He claimed he couldn't pay much because of debts, because of work hours, because of every excuse men like him keep in a little drawer labeled, "Not my problem." The court ordered a small amount. It barely covered anything. And getting it consistently was its own sport, but my father said it mattered that he was finally on paper. My sister, of course, blamed us for that too. She said we were humiliating her by involving him. I said to my mother, "So when he pays nothing, it's abandonment, but when someone makes him pay something, it's humiliation?" My mother gave me the tired look of a woman who had run out of space for logic. My marriage changed during all of this. Some parts got stronger and some parts got bruised in places I didn't expect. My husband became more careful around my family. He still loved my parents, but he stopped assuming family meant safety. I noticed him leaving rooms when my mother and I discussed my sister. I noticed him flinch when someone joked about his channel or his role at home, even harmlessly. One night he admitted he felt stupid for caring what my sister thought. I told him it wasn't stupid. It was human. Then I admitted I felt guilty that my family had made our home feel unsafe. He said, "Your sister did that, not your whole family." I wanted to believe him, and mostly I did, but guilt doesn't care about accurate footnotes. It just spreads. As months passed, life started doing that rude thing where it keeps going, even when part of you is still standing in a disaster. My work stayed busy. The clinic changed systems because apparently suffering can always be upgraded. My husband's channel grew again after a few stressful months where he barely posted. He started filming more family-friendly content because he didn't want his work to feel like an escape from the family mess. He wanted it to support the life we were still building. I began helping behind the scenes, at first just organizing sponsorship emails and checking contracts for weird payment language, then sometimes filming little travel clips or helping plan content. I was good at the boring details. He was good at making people feel like they were hanging out with a friend. Together, weirdly, it worked. My parents encouraged us to take a trip tied to one of his contracts. At first, I refused. It felt obscene to plan travel while my nephews were living in my childhood bedroom, and my sister was missing supervised visits. My mother said, "The boys need to see normal life too." My father said he would come if we wanted him to help. That became the plan. My parents, the boys, our daughter, my husband, and me. It took paperwork and permission and more patience than I naturally possess, but eventually it came together. The trip was not glamorous in the way people imagine. It was airport snacks, meltdowns, missing socks, my father getting confused by a bathroom lock, and my husband trying to film around children who kept asking if they could be in the video. But there were beautiful moments too, in the normal human way, not the fake, perfect way. The boys laughed hard for the first time in what felt like forever. My daughter fell asleep on my husband's lap during a train ride. My mother smiled in a picture without looking like she was holding herself together with tape. The reason for the trip was partly a contract and partly that my husband had been searching for a rare collectible tied to the kind of games he covered. It was silly and expensive and deeply him. My sister would have mocked it until the walls peeled. The boys thought it was the coolest thing in the world. They helped him look for it in little shops, whispering like treasure hunters, and when he finally found it, one of them hugged the box like he had personally saved the family business. My husband bought them each a tiny, cheap souvenir too, not to replace anything, not to buy love just because he wanted to. Watching him with them hurt in a strange way. He was not their father. He was not trying to be, but he was steady. He showed up. He listened. He remembered which one hated onions and which one pretended not to be scared of elevators. My sister had called that weakness. I saw it as the thing that had been missing from so many rooms. When we came home, things did not magically heal. My sister still missed visits. Sometimes she would make one and the boys would come back quiet, clutching candy she brought like proof she existed. My parents kept going to court dates and meetings. The ex paid when forced. My husband kept working. I kept working. Our daughter still asked why her aunt didn't come over anymore, but less often. The cracked picture frame from the day my sister forced her way in stayed in a drawer because I couldn't decide whether to fix it or throw it away. That sounds small. But it became this stupid symbol in my head. Fixing it felt like pretending. Throwing it away felt like admitting something permanent. So it sat there, broken and useless, like half the family conversations we weren't having. The final message from my sister came on a random Tuesday, because of course life-changing emotional nonsense never has the decency to arrive at a dramatic hour. I was eating lunch at my desk, scrolling through clinic messages, when I saw an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was my husband's role at home, written as an insult I won't even dignify by repeating here. I opened it because I am apparently committed to hurting my own feelings. It was shorter than her usual rants. She wrote that I could tell myself whatever I wanted, but he had destroyed her life just by existing the way he did. She said before him, people understood her. After him, everyone compared her to a man who got praised for doing women's work and making money from nonsense. She said he made her look like a failure without even trying. She said she hoped one day I felt what it was like to be replaced in my own family. I sat there with my plastic fork in my hand, staring at that email, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to answer. Not because I was calm and healed and floating above the drama like some emotionally evolved cloud. Please. I still wanted to write back. I wanted to tell her she wasn't replaced. She stepped away every time accountability walked toward her. I wanted to tell her my husband didn't ruin her life. Her pride did. I wanted to tell her the boys still loved her and she was wasting chances other parents would crawl across glass for. But under all that anger, something clicked into place. She had never hated my husband because he was weak. That was the lie she used because it sounded better than the truth. She hated him because he stayed. He stayed when work disappeared. He stayed when parenting was hard. He stayed when my family needed him. He stayed even after she humiliated him. He stayed, and every time he did, it made the absence of the men who left her look louder. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to myself as proof, and archived it without answering. Then I went to the bathroom and cried, because apparently I am still me. After work, I told my husband about it. He listened, then asked, "Are you okay?" Not, "What did she say about me?" Not, "Did you defend me?" Just that. I said I was sad. He said he was too. We ordered takeout from a local place, nothing fancy, and ate at the kitchen table while our daughter told us a very long story about a drawing she made at school. My husband laughed at the right parts. I watched him wipe sauce off her chin with his thumb. Such a small thing. Such an ordinary thing. And maybe that's what my sister couldn't forgive. Not the trips, not the money, not the house, not the channel. The ordinary steadiness of him. I don't talk to my sister now. My parents still do, carefully because she is their daughter and the boy's mother, and I don't envy that tightrope. The boys are still with them. The visits are still supervised when she shows up. Some weeks she seems better. Some weeks she disappears into her own resentment again. I don't pretend to know how it ends. Real life is rude like that. It doesn't wrap everything neatly because a narrator has suffered enough. My husband still works from home. He still packs our daughter's lunch wrong sometimes. Putting the crunchy snack in the wrong container like this household hasn't covered the rules extensively. I still work at the clinic and still complain about insurance codes like they personally betrayed me. We still fight about laundry. We still laugh in the kitchen. We still lock the doors. The last time I saw my sister in person was at a supervised visit drop-off by accident. I was bringing the boys their forgotten jackets at my parents' request, and she was outside the building smoking even though she told everyone she had quit. She looked thinner, harder, not evil, not ruined, just worn down by her own war. For 1 second, she looked at me like she might say something normal. Maybe, "How are you?" Maybe, "Do the boys like school?" Maybe even, "I'm sorry," though that was probably my imagination doing unpaid labor. Instead, she said, "He's still at home playing dad?" I almost laughed again, but this time I didn't. I said, "Yeah, he is." Then I handed my mother the jackets and left. In the car, I expected to feel triumphant. I didn't. I felt tired. I felt sad. I felt strangely free, because her insult didn't land anymore. It couldn't. My husband was at home that day, editing a video while our daughter napped under a blanket he had warmed in the dryer because she said it made her feel cozy. Later, he would pick her up, make dinner badly, probably burn one side of something and call it rustic, then ask me about my day like he hadn't been quietly holding our family together for years. If that's not a real man, then honestly, I don't want whatever definition my sister is using. So no, this doesn't end with forgiveness at a holiday table or my sister crying in my arms while everyone heals over pie. I wish life worked like that sometimes, mostly because it would be easier to explain. It ends with boundaries. It ends with my nephews safe but still missing their mom. It ends with my parents exhausted and doing their best. It ends with my daughter slowly forgetting the day her aunt scared her, though I know my husband and I won't forget it. It ends with me choosing not to answer emails designed to drag me back into a fight my sister would rather keep having than face herself. And it ends with the one truth I had to learn the hard way. Some people don't hate you because you failed them. They hate you because you stopped letting them use your love as a place to hide.